Hi, I'm Catherine Llewellyn, the host of the podcast. You can find out all about Truth and Transcendence on truthandtranscendence.com. And you can find out all about me on beingspace.world, where you will find my online coaching offering as well as my UK-based workshops. The Freedom of Spirit workshop for liberation and empowerment, the Pellower Radical Shift in Consciousness workshop for spiritual expansion, and transformational coaching for exploring the mind-body-spirit connection on the expansive path. You can also support the podcast by actually making a donation. I hope you enjoy the show. Welcome to Truth and Transcendence. You can find all our other episodes on truthandtranscendence.com. Today, I'm delighted to welcome special guest Jane Duncan Rogers, who's here today to talk about a lot of things, but one of the key themes we're going to talk about is self-honesty. And having just read one of Jane's books where self-honesty is shining out of every single page, I know Jane's got a lot to say about this and an authentic connection with it. So Jane is an award-winning coach and author and a later life wisdom woman. Devastated by the loss of her first husband to cancer, Jane shares the journey in her beautiful book, Gifted by Grief, which you can see behind me if you're watching this on video. So originally, Jane trained with Louise Hay, and with her 35 years of experience in the psychotherapeutic and training fields, she now helps over 60s to age wackily and well, without fear of the future getting in the way, which I think is fantastic. And I think we all know our aging population is growing and people are living to all sorts of ages. So I think Jane has actually leapt into this at exactly the right time. And right now, Jane and her second husband are currently building an ecohouse in Scotland in the UK. So you can find Jane at janeduncanrogers.com. That's JaneDuncanRogers.com. So Jane, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I'm delighted to be here.
Excellent. Now, of course, Jane and I have known each other for a very long time because we actually both worked in the same place back in the early 80s, probably. So we both still look exactly the same as we did then. No, better, I like to think.
Yeah.
We've also picked up a few bits of knowledge along the way since then. So, Jane, this theme of self-honesty, if you cast your mind back, can you remember when you first really connected with self-honesty and realized that this was a really core theme for you?
Yes, well, I didn't describe it like that, and I have never described it like this. But over the years, it's been a consistent thread that people have said to me, "You're so honest with yourself. You're so honest." And so I've come to understand that that is something that people can see. But there was a moment which was defining really, age 13. I can remember standing at the end of our road. I had been to a party maybe a couple of nights before something, one of my very first ever parties as a teenager, and it had not been a good experience. I had definitely been a wallflower. There were all sorts of other things that happened, but the end result of this was at the end of the road, I said to myself, I need to stop being shy. I need to learn how to be a bit more outgoing and confident. And I had a good role model, which was my mum, because she was like that naturally, whereas I was very shy. I find it really difficult to even say hello to people without going red, for example. But I decided that I was going to do this, and I watched my mum to see what she did. And I memorized a few phrases that I put on a shelf in my mind. I imagined a bookshelf in my mind with a few phrases that I could pick off that shelf whenever I needed to say something to somebody. And I watched her and I saw that what she did was she asked questions of people. So those were some of the things I memorized, how are you and what school do you go to and that sort of thing. And I forced myself to do it. I can remember feeling just so embarrassed to say hello and anything else. But I learned really quickly that when you ask a question of someone, they start talking about themselves, and then it's a natural flow to ask another question, and that then starts a conversation. So that was a moment, if I look back in it, that is a moment of pretty radical self-honesty and taking action as a result. Had a big effect in my life.
Amazing. Well, good for you. So, for those of us who are still shy and don't know what to say to people, was there anything on any of those shelves that might surprise us that was a really good thing to say to people?
Well, nowadays, I think I would do it differently. So very often the question is, hi, how are you? Or how do you know so and so? That was always a good one. How do you know so and so? The other one that usually people ask is, well, what do you do? But the thing is, when you get a little bit older and you might be dealing with people who are retired and they respond by saying, I'm retired, I realized, well, I don't care if you're retired or not. I really want to know what makes your heart sing, or how do you spend most of your days, or things like that. So now that's the sort of question that I would ask.
Yes, excellent. Great. So, because, yeah, when we're 13, it's a totally different thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, that sounds like that was a moment of, as you said, it was self-honesty, but then almost immediately going into an action with it. And
Yeah.
you were standing at the end of your road. Was this on the way back from the party?
No, this was 2 or 3 days later when I had time, or maybe a week later when I'd had time to digest some of the not very nice experiences that had happened at that party. I didn't go to another party for about a year, mind you, but I think over that time, I basically practiced whenever I was in some kind of a social situation, instead of holding back and being shy, I would make myself go forward. And it was excruciating, I have to say. I do remember the excruciatingness of it. Um, but I knew that I didn't want to be this shy person. I mean, basically, I developed a confident persona, and that persona in later years had to fall apart, by the way, so that I could let a more genuine side of me come through. But in those days, it worked really well, actually, worked really well.
Yeah. So it got you into the game, as it were. It got you off the, what do you call it, the reserve bench
Yes.
and actually interacting. Because kids at the age of 13 can be mean, can't they? Uh,
Yeah.
Especially in social situations where everyone's supposed to be kind.
Yeah, exactly. And it just was not like that.
Yeah. Yeah. Amazing. And I'm just curious, when you made that decision, right, I've got to become more confident and able to talk to people, can you remember, other than the fact that it felt very uncomfortable being so shy and not being able to, can you remember anything else about why that was an important thing to do? You know, why it mattered to you to actually break out in that way?
If I had been more confident, I might have been able. So at the party, we were playing the spin the bottle game, and I was so shy that I couldn't say no, that I didn't want to do it. And I couldn't say no when I was selected by a young boy to go into a cupboard who wanted to kiss me. And I didn't know that you could say no. It's like, and it was horrible. It was really horrible. But if I had been able to, if I had felt more confident in myself, so part of this reaching out and not being shy was to develop confidence. I didn't think of it like that at the time, but certainly that was one of the results. Then I would have been, I like to think that I would have felt more able to just say no and not have that horrible experience.
Yeah, and protect yourself, actually.
Exactly, exactly.
Well,
And there's a whole lot of other issues in there, i.e., I was not brought up that it was possible to say no, but I didn't know that ever for quite a long time. That had big impact through the rest of my life, but I know it now, thank goodness. So
yeah.
it's not too never too late.
No, exactly. I think that's such a great example because, by the way, we're not going to spend the entire episode on your party at the age of 13. But I think that's a great example where you noticing something about yourself and realizing this could not be allowed to continue because you would not be safe. You know, you would not be able to hold your sovereignty, hold your ground, and
Yeah,
realizing that some action needed to be taken. That's very, very powerful. And I think that sort of highlights how self-honesty is part of our toolkit
yeah,
for protecting ourselves and looking after ourselves, which is very interesting because I think sometimes people think of it as a risky or vulnerable thing to do, as opposed
yeah.
to a thing which will help us be more protected.
Yeah, that's interesting because people often say to me, that they appreciate how vulnerable I'm being. And it doesn't necessarily feel vulnerable to me at all. It's much more, for me, it's much more, I'm just being the way I am in that particular situation. It doesn't feel difficult or anything. But for them, clearly, it is something that maybe they're not so used to, and so they can get inspired by, or perplexed by, maybe, or at least curious to ask questions.
Mm. Yes. So, and I think that can happen, can't it, when you've been practicing something for some years? So for you, it's just natural.
Yeah, exactly,
It,
exactly.
it's like if I go into a restaurant, I'm not going to have any dessert because I don't take sugar. And people say, "How can you resist the dessert?" And actually, I'm just not even tempted because it's just not part of, it's like a what we're acclimatized to, isn't it, over time?
Yeah, exactly, exactly.
So how did that unfold from there? Your relationship with self-honesty, how did that kind of flow from there forward into your life?
Well, I think that I had probably a few stops and starts along the way, but the when we how we first came to join in the company that we worked together, that was another part where I was in my mid-20s, and although I was very successful in work, I was very unhappy at home, and that one of the results of that was me being bulimic at a time when that was not a known thing. And it took me, I do remember it took me maybe 6 months before it dawned on me that actually this was not the ideal way to keep my weight the way I wanted it to be and to eat everything that I wanted. But uh, so that moment of honesty took me to the doctor, who then recommended psychiatric help, which didn't work. Well, I only had one session and that was the end of that. But I it was very soon after that that I heard about the exegesis seminar, and then I did it, and then I went full flow into joining the organization, and I but as a result of making that decision, I stopped throwing up immediately, like overnight. So the things that had been bothering me were being answered. And that was wonderful, actually. And that period of life for me in my 20s was, I would say, joining that organization that we were both part of was the best thing that I ever did. And leaving it was also the best thing I ever did. So it sounds as though, that can't possibly be true, but of course it is because I changed a lot in that time. Um, and actually leaving was something that happened as a result of me being very honest as well. I started speaking out about what I thought was really going on underneath, behind the scenes, let's say, which you might not be surprised to know is something that I always am interested in, whatever is really going on behind the scenes, whether it's in a business or in a personal relationship or in a book or whatever it is. I want to know how it really works. And but when I started speaking out about this, the end result of this was that I was offered and then took redundancy, and so that led to the next stage in my life. So it looks on the surface as though me being honest in that moment was not a good thing, because people don't usually assume redundancy as a good thing. Well, of course, it didn't feel good to start with, but of course, looking back, I can see that it was a brilliant opportunity for me because of the other things that then happened. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And do you actually, if you look back now, do you actually think that for you that it was time to leave that organization at that point?
Oh, yes, definitely. There was no doubt about it. I had grown quite a lot, and I was no longer willing be to be living two lives in a way. And in a way, this is what it was like when I was 13, except I didn't really have the mental capacity to think about it like that then. But I was aware that I was saying one thing and doing another, and I've never been very happy with that. And I will, if I see that's going on somewhere, I will do my best to call it out, because I hate the untruth in it. I'd much rather, it's like if there's an elephant in the room, let us see the elephant. Um, and I mean that I went on later in life as a result of gifted by grief to found this end of life planning company. And if you certainly in those days, so that was 2016 when I started that, it's like nobody talked about end of life planning. It wasn't even a search term. But, I was going like, hey, folks, we're all going to die, We need to think about this in advance. Just like you would plan a wedding, you need to plan a funeral, like not with just a few days to spare and leave it to, well, obviously you're going to leave it to your family and friends because you're dead. But it was like, well, it took quite a long time to get that message through. It's changed now. It's changed now.
Absolutely. Well, of course, you had a crash course in being aware of the importance of that with what you went through with your first husband, Philip. And as I said to you just before we started recording, I feel like I've just spent 5 years with you over the last weekend by reading your book
Yeah.
and traveling through that journey with you. But you really do. And I think I said earlier on that the self-honesty comes through in that book because you're absolutely chasing down, as you were just describing, what's the truth, what's happening with me, what's happening with this situation, what's happening in my relationship with Philip, what is death anyway, what on earth is any of this, who knows, I don't know, is that okay that I don't know, etc.
Yeah.
And this sort of inquiry that runs all the way through I found it very bold as an inquiry, because you're not at no point are you saying, there were a few times when you decided to watch TV and eat chocolate, weren't there? But because otherwise that was just the right thing to do in that moment. But you're pretty relentless with the self-honesty all the way through, weren't you?
Yeah, and I was obsessed a bit when I think back on it. I was obsessed with discovering what was the difference between a body that we call alive and is a person and was Philip, and a body that we call dead, which is what I saw because I was there when he died, and I could see that it was different. It was completely different. And even though I had known this intellectually and I'd read about it and all the rest of it, I had never experienced being with somebody when they actually died. And there he was. Well, it wasn't him. It just so much was not him. And I I remember I had to stop. I had been talking to him, reassuring him that it would be fine and all the rest of it. And not that I knew that, but I imagined that it would be. And then I had to stop talking to his face because it was not him anymore. So I started talking to the ceiling as if whatever he was that had been in this thing that we call a body was somewhere else in the room. And it was extraordinary, actually, really intense, because very, very quickly I was no longer interested in that body. It wasn't him anymore. So it didn't matter what happened to it. If there had been a recycling bin, and that's what we did with bodies, I would have probably put it in there. And, that's not a common thing. Many people speak of how important it is to sit with a body and to pay their respects. And absolutely, that is important if that's important for you. For me, it was completely different. It was different. My parents have died as well about 7 years ago, and it was different with them. I didn't have the same experience, but then, of course, I was a different person, having had the experience of Philip dying and getting obsessed with discovering what is this thing that is in our body? Is it a thing anyway? Of course, it's not a thing, but the thing that is a thing, if you like, is this thing here.
Yeah.
When that isn't anymore, well, what is there? I'm
Yes.
still asking that question, if you like.
Yes. Well, I think it's part of our journey to keep asking that question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I sometimes think when we've got all of the answers, that's when we just sort of ascend and leave a little pool of clothing on the floor.
Yes.
you know, and our dog ascends as well, and they're just the lead on the floor.
Yes, that's right.
Because we don't need the body anymore. There's a
No.
lovely bit in the book when you say, maybe what we're supposed to be doing here is going in and out of the pain and the joy and the pain and the joy. Maybe that's what we're supposed to be doing, but we think what we're supposed to be doing is enjoying it. So when the pain is there, we think we're doing something wrong. Would you like to expand on that?
Yeah, that was really important actually, because I mean, I've written about it like that, but in the moment or during that time, what I was feeling was I mean, the strength of the physical pain and the emotional pain and the spiritual pain was intense, really intense, much more than I had ever imagined it would be. And I just held on to the only thing that I knew about this, which was what Louise Hay had said, which was what you feel, you can heal. So I knew I needed to allow the feelings to be there, which was extremely difficult when they were really painful. But I discovered in that process that if I allowed them to be there, didn't try and push them away, then and later I can't remember if I talk about this in the book or not, but anyway, I now call it front door, back door thinking. So you open the front door, you allow the feelings in, you welcome them in even, and then you open the back door of your house at the same time so that they can easily go. Really, really important that because feelings, if you try and push them away, they don't ever go away. They come again in another form, in one way or another. So I learned that the hard way. But when I look back, I can see that that was quite probably perhaps the most instrumental part of my coming through that difficult period. Yeah, and of course, once you've learned that in such a big way like that, then that's what I practice as much as I can now. It's not perfect. I'm still trying to push things away, and I still often will, well, perhaps not often, but I will still definitely be eating chocolate sometimes in front of the telly rather mindlessly
Excellent.
and thinking I should be being honest with myself and not.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Because you are in fact still human, which
Exactly.
I'm glad you are, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to be here talking to me.
No,
So
exactly.
yeah, I read that was a beautiful bit. And of course you were doing that with Philip as well, weren't you? You'd open the door and for him to come in and then you open the door for him to leave.
Yeah, 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 I did.
Allowing all of that.
Yeah.
And also those beautiful things when you're talking about experiencing his energy and presence after he'd shuffled off the bag, as you refer to the body, this empty bag,
Yeah.
and gone off. And so you had him coming in. Another thing in the book that was really powerful, I thought, was the listening.
Mhm.
Would you share with the listeners the listening, what that's about?
The listening is the term that I gave to what some might call automatic writing or channeled writing, which I had been, I had discovered sometime previously, some years previously, that if I can't actually tell you the truth, remember exactly how it first happened, but I knew that if I sat down in the early morning, it would always be the early morning in a quiet space in myself. I might not actually be meditating formally, but with a notebook and pen in my hand, then words would come to me and I would sense them here in this part of my head and see them visually somewhere here, and then I would write them down. And that's what I call the listening. And they were always, always loving, honest, caring, quite hard hitting sometimes, not always what I wanted to hear, but I could recognize the honesty in them and the truth in them, and that brought me a lot of solace. And yeah, so this was it was and still is from time to time. I don't use that tool as much as I did, which was then very important, but I still do. And it's well, I was going to say comforting. Sometimes it's comforting. Sometimes it's a bit of more of a wake-up call, which is a good. It's good.
Yeah. Well, the sense I got when I was reading the extracts that you put in the book was that they were very affirming of,
Yeah.
of you and your sovereignty and that you are love and so on,
Yeah.
which I thought was very beautiful. And the voice is different from your voice. So, sometimes people say, no, this is just your subconscious. Well, it might be, but if it is, it's a piece that I could do with hearing more of because I don't always hear it. So
Yeah.
whatever it is, wherever it's coming from, that was beautiful. I will just say to everyone listening and watching, this is a beautiful book, Gifted by Grief. I heartily recommend it. I've just read it in a weekend, and you could read it over a much longer period. And I was saying to Jane earlier that you could read it several times because it has these different layers: spirituality, emotionality, loss, truth, ascendance, all these different aspects. And then woven through it, there are these various tools or techniques or ways of inquiring and engaging with some of these things that are very, very useful. And just such a courageous, open-hearted book, Jane. I cannot congratulate you enough for actually, surviving it, because what you went through, for some people, would have just destroyed them,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
and they just would not have come back from it.
No, no, that's right. And actually, there's another thing which I didn't write about this in the book because it hadn't happened, but I don't think I wrote about it. But anyway, I one of the moments of self-honesty was realizing that I had not, in our 20-year marriage, been able to have a fully open heart, probably ever. And I was aware, we were aware of this, certainly in the later years, but not able, I was not able to do anything about that, even though I tried. But afterwards, various other things happened, and I realized why that was possible, why that wasn't possible. And I promised myself then that if I ever got the chance to be with somebody again, that I would keep my heart open. And this would be my way of honoring Philip. Now, that was at the point when I was like, I couldn't possibly ever imagine finding anybody like him ever again. And, I wasn't interested. But I'm also quite a pragmatic person. So I recognized that, okay, this would mean if I was going to be on my own for the rest of my life, it'd probably be 30 years on my own. I couldn't quite imagine that, just at the same way as I couldn't quite imagine 30 years without anybody. Anyway, later on, it did turn out that I did meet somebody and I had the opportunity to put this promise to myself into practice. And the lovely man that I'm now married to is a completely different person. He's not at all analytical. So he doesn't understand when I'm talking about, exploring why something has happened the way it has happened. What I have to do when my heart is closed and I can feel it when it closes and opens, I need to go out into the woods and sort it out myself. And that's what I do. And that's what the practice was quite a lot, I must say, in the first 18 months or so.
Yeah,
A lot easier now.
beautiful. And you're holding your autonomy around that. You're owning that, and you are doing the practice you need to do, rather than um, projecting onto him that he ought to change to make
Well,
it
no,
easier for you.
I tried that as well, but it didn't work.
Oh, he sounds like just the chap.
Well, he hadn't got a clue what was going on. He just knew that I was being crabby and bad-tempered, and his way of dealing with that is to maybe do the washing up or do something practical around the house to make me feel better. So I could see that all this was going on.
Yeah.
But I knew what he was doing, and it was so sweet. That was his way of trying to help me. But I knew that the only way that I could help myself was to unravel it by going out in my way is going out into the woods, walking, giving myself what I call a talking to, which is basically being honest with myself. Sometimes it would include doing some listening because that can work as well. So, yeah. But anyway, the result of this is that my heart, I feel like I have fulfilled my promise that I made to Philip, and that I'm now benefiting from that in this relationship, which is just lovely. I mean, honestly, we are so blessed and so lucky.
Fantastic. Well, I don't think it's just about luck, is it? Because you've worked very hard over the years.
That's
And,
true.
although he's not familiar with some of the same, shall we say, thought forms
Mhm.
that you're familiar with, I'm sure he's done his own evolving in his own way to be able to meet you
Yeah,
in love,
yeah,
in the way that you do meet and
yeah,
cherish one another.
yeah.
And
No,
you're building out an eco house together. I mean, that's either going to make or break a relationship, right?
that's true. That's true. Well, yes, interesting. I learned with that, my job was well, I had a full-time work anyway, but his work was building the house, is building the house. And I get to input, and that's the way it works for us. Um, yeah. I think one thing that I would say about this, because in relationship to grief, he had been married before, and his wife had died maybe just 6 months or so before I met him. And so I'm like, oh my God, Jane, watch out, watch out. This guy is, he probably hasn't fully experienced his grief yet because I was remembering myself at 6 months. So I was really watching out for when this would hit. And it never did hit. And slowly over time, I realized that he just processed it in a different way, completely different way. He was much more accepting than I was. I was ranting and raving about why Philip had to die at all. For quite a long time, I was very angry a lot of the time. And Ian was not like that at all. He was like, oh well, this has happened. Now I get a bonus life. He's a computer techie kind of guy, so he was thinking about bonus life in terms of computer games. Whereas me, I would have been like, but I don't want a bonus life. I don't want a bonus life. And that helps to keep you stuck.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Yeah. Yeah.
I learned that there are different ways to process grief. I mean, the two quite extreme ways here. And we got through it in different ways. And we're now able to be very grateful for both our previous spouses because without their lives and their deaths, we would not be together creating this lovely house and this good life together.
Yeah. Which you're probably doing more ritually than you would have done without those previous relationships.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, very good for you. And I think, a lot of people, after one very significant relationship has passed, just assume, right, that's it then.
Yeah.
So thank you for demonstrating to us that doesn't need to be the case. So how does self-honesty inform and fuel the work you're doing now with the over 60s?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, first of all, I moved on from the company that I had founded, the end of life planning company. That was important because I recognized that I'd got to the end of it for me much sooner than I thought it was going to happen. And then I promised myself that I was not going to start anything else. By this time, I'd got my state pension, so that gave me a little bit of breathing space financially. And I wasn't going to start anything else until I really felt like it would arrive from within me as opposed to me deciding I was going to do something. Because I've been pretty good at doing stuff in my life, and a large part of now is learning how to not do. But anyway, so it bubbled up that I was going to start writing again about embracing aging. And for me, that was like, okay, right. At that point, I was 67. I'm like, at 67, I can't really describe myself as even middle-aged, let alone young. It's quite a difficult one to take on that. And I thought, well, if I've got to go through aging, which I have, maybe others are going through this as well. I'm going to write about that. And so that's what I'm doing really at the moment. And I don't have any plan about whether it will be another book. Probably that another book will come out of this. I don't know. But I'm really experimenting, I would say, with being less determined about what is the way that I'm going forward and more responsive to what is showing up to me in the moment and see what happens. We're going to see what happens.
Beautiful. And do you sometimes spend time, working with people, helping them with their relationship with aging?
Yes, I do. I do. I still do a little bit of coaching, not a huge amount, but I do a bit of coaching. It's not always helping them with their aging, although that is usually a part of it because I tend to attract people who are probably 50 plus at least, I would say. But that's a part of it. But it's often about relationships actually, like what is really going on here? Let's unpack it and see because if there's stuff that is going on underneath, and you'll know this as well, if there's stuff that's going on underneath, it comes out. It comes out, it just sort of infiltrates everything that you do. And no matter how much you're trying to change things on the outside, if you don't understand and make the changes on the inside, it just carries on, which is tedious to say the least.
Yeah. 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 And when people are talking to you about aging, what are the main sort of issues that they're bringing?
Yeah, the main issues are usually physical. That's the first one. people dealing with various physical challenges that they have never really had to think about before because their body has just done whatever they wanted it to do without even thinking about it. And suddenly, or maybe not so suddenly, it's not. They have to think about it. That's one. The other one is fear of losing their independence or becoming a burden to people and not knowing what to do about that. And the other one is being alone, fear of being alone. Um, Maybe alone when they're much older and or maybe because they don't have any family, any children. With that, along with that goes the assumption that your children will look after you when you're old, which is not by any means the case. Um, so those, I would say, are the top three challenges that people have. And I mean, how else, with a situation where your body is going to get older and some of the effects that, ha that happen in our culture are the ones that I've talked about. You know, it's not true for every culture, but certainly in the West, that's what it's like. Um, but it's going to happen anyway. So how else does one manage it other than by the very practical things that you can do with exercise and diet and strengthening and all that sort of stuff, your muscles and all that. But you get to manage your mind, you know, that's what you can do. There's a lot that one can do with one's mind, as we both know, and that makes a huge difference to how you turn up in the day. So, just to hark back to, or take us back to when my husband died, one of the things that my brother said to me after that time was that he admired about me my ability to find the positive things in adversity. And and I thought about that because coming out of my brother's mouth, it was like, oh gosh, never knew you thought that. So then I looked back over my life and I thought, yeah, that is true. That is what I have been able to do. And I did it then. And I'm doing it now as well with aging. You know, it's not a question of ignoring or trying to push it away like the feelings. You know, you can't do that. You have to allow it to be there. But if you can release the thoughts and the beliefs that you might have about it as well, then you might actually discover that there's some gifts as well. And that's really what my work's about.
Fantastic. Well, I'll bet it's very, very helpful, Jane,
I hope so.
because you look very vibrant.
Thanks.
Do you mind me asking how old you are now?
Oh, I was 68 last weekend.
Congratulations.
Thank
Last
you.
weekend,
Yeah,
literally a couple of days ago.
yeah.
Well, how interesting, because it was my birthday at the weekend as well. Is
No,
yours on Saturday?
mine was on, was it it's the 14th.
Ah, mine's the week after, the
Right.
20th.
Okay, all
So we're
right.
not quite twins,
No, not quite, but nearly. Still Virgos.
still Virgos. Fantastic. Well, this has been such a great conversation. I feel like there's so many themes here for people to tune into. And I think one of them that really comes through for me is this whole theme of actually um, not just taking for granted the immediate
Yeah,
feeling or thought about what's going on.
yeah,
That's that thing of, hold on, what am I actually experiencing? What's actually going on? What's going on under the surface?
yeah.
And as you said, you've always had this thing of, I want to know what's under the surface. I want to know how it works. And I will say something about it and I will ask a question. Sometimes that means people as, offering me my coat, you know.
Exactly.
Um, but ultimately, like with that situation you said with the organization we both worked in, that was actually the right time for you.
Absolutely.
Perhaps not the most comfortable way for it to happen, but it in hindsight.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
you know, well, I really want to thank you for all the work you're doing. I want to thank you for the book. I haven't read your other books. I'm sure they're equally fantastic.
Thank you.
Um, we've talked about a lot today. If there are people listening who've thought, well, this sounds intriguing in what Jane's talking about, but I can't quite not quite sure what I might do with it or how I might engage with it or how I might, take it into my life. What might you say to somebody who's feeling like that?
I would say come and follow me on where I'm writing regularly at the moment on about embracing aging on Substack.com. So because there, you know, and the way I write, and you'll know this now from having read my book, is the sort of thing that I'm saying right now, that's the way that I write.
Mm.
Sometimes there might be a few references thrown in and some reflection about the thinking behind what I'm saying, but often it's me in quite a conversational style, saying what it is that I think I'm going through and what I'm learning from it and why that is the case and how that relates to aging and stuff like that. That's so if you want more of this, that's where I'm doing it right now. And that's a weekly newsletter. Otherwise, yeah, reach out, get in touch with me. I love it when people get in touch with me. I'm really up for that. I like meeting people.
Excellent. Well, I will, when we finish recording, I'll get the link from you for the Substack and I'll put it in the show notes so that
Okay,
people can actually go and check that out.
great.
Um, we've got a lot of interesting things going on in the world at the moment, I think is an understatement. And I like to think there's a lot of people out there trying to be good leaders, being part of the solution, being, guiding, supporting others. Um, some of those people will be listening to this podcast right now. So, is there anything you'd like to say to those people from this place of your connection with self-honesty and all the other strands of wisdom that we've been talking about today?
Yeah, because it's really easy to go down the route of feeling despairing and despondent and angry about the way the world is. And I don't allow myself to go down there. I do not allow it to happen. And if I feel that it coming on, I take action to make sure that I don't go down that route. Now, I know some people can channel that into activism and whatever, which is fantastic. For me, I'm like, I need to start focusing right now, here in my life, what I can do, what I'm grateful for. Gratitude is massive, massive. It's a really important thing. It's a very, very simple tool, but it has huge impact. And doing and being the best me that I can be, if you like. I know that's a little bit trite to say, but it's true, because when that happens and when I'm connected with this, whatever it is inside this body that makes it alive, then it shines out. It just shines out. And you can't help but be affected by that. And I get affected by it as well. And then it's lovely. Then we're all in love together. And even though that might be a tiny little pocket in the middle of a whole lot of stuff going on, given the fact that we could die any moment, and now I know this, we could die any moment, you might as well be living your life in that place of love for as much of those moments as you possibly can.
Amen to that. Beautiful. Jane, I could carry on talking to you for hours. This is so enjoyable. And like I said, I feel like I've just spent the weekend with you anyway, reading the book. We've talked about a lot today. Has there been a favorite part of our conversation for you?
I love that we've been talking about this whole theme. Nobody's ever asked me about that before. People have commented, but they haven't asked me to reflect on this whole thing of being self-honest. That and the fact that you asked me about the listening, many, many people just ignore that. But actually, it's quite an important part. And you could say of the self-honesty stuff as well. It's not always easy to hear things from a different consciousness, let's say, that you don't like as much as you thought you might. Let's put it that way.
Exactly. Beautiful. Well, I've really enjoyed talking about those things as well. These gems. There are many more gems in the book, everybody. Really do check it out. So one final thing I like to ask my guests, if you'd like to, is to give the listeners some sort of reflection question that they can take away to contemplate over the coming week before the
Mhm.
next guest episode comes out, and they offer a reflection question that might help them really kind of engage with and metabolize some of what we've been talking about today.
Okay. I think a good question and one that has served me very well is what, if you're trying to sort things out at various different ways in your life, to look for what is the common denominator. And the common denominator is very often me, because I'm the one that's in all those situations, or there might be some aspect of what has been going on. And that, if you can see that there's a thread that is going through whatever everything is, no matter how different it looks on the surface, then you have the beginnings of exploring that what that thread actually means because it's informing all of those other situations. So yeah, that's what I call the common denominator, that thread.
Beautiful. So the question is, what in among the things we're trying to address, what is the common denominator? What's the thread? Such a great piece of advice. I've actually done that myself, and it really does work.
Yeah.
Fantastic. Sometimes we don't like the common denominator that we discover.
No. Hey,
But hey,
that's
where
just
is it
the way it
written
is.
that we're going to like all of it?
Yeah.
Brilliant. Jane, is there anything else you'd like to say before we complete about any of what we've been talking about today?
Um, yeah, just one last thing. I'm just attracted by the title of the book, Gifted by Grief. You know, there is a gift in everything. There absolutely 100% is a gift in everything, even in every awful, awful, awful situation. And the time might not be right for you to find that gift, but at some point, if you have the intention to find it, it will present itself to you. I'm completely 100% convinced of that, and I've had demonstration of that in my life. So, yeah, look for the gift.
Beautiful. Thank you so much. I'm taking that right into the heart because that's one of those wham statements. Thank you so much. Well,
Okay,
it's been
thanks.
absolutely brilliant. Stay on after I stop recording so we can just
Yeah,
say goodbye. But thank you so much,
it's a pleasure. I
Jane.
really enjoyed it.
Jane Duncan Rogers, everybody. Should read the book.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everybody, for watching and listening. Please go to truthandtranscendence.com for all the other episodes, which are building up every week. Lots and lots of them. Thank you, Jane. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. It really helps if you give a thumbs up, a 5-star rating, a review, and share with your friends. If you're looking for transformational coaching or an intensive transformational weekend workshop experience, I can help with that. You can actually help the show by making a donation. Until next time, take care.